I won the lottery. $2.7 billion. After 78 years of counting pennies and fixing what others ignored, the world finally looked my way. And suddenly, they appeared. A stepson who hadn't called in years. Concerned voices. Visits that lasted too long. Gifts, paperwork. Smiles sharp enough to cut. They said they cared. Said I needed help. But what they really meant was, hand it over quietly. What they didn't realize was this. I've been overlooked my whole life, and I'd learned how to listen. And I heard everything. Before I go any further, do me one small favor. If you're listening from somewhere quiet or busy, late at night or early morning, tap subscribe and leave a comment saying where you're from. It helps these stories find the people who need them. Now, let me tell you how it really began. My name is Harold Whitman. I'm 78 years old, and I've lived in Briarfield, Ohio my whole life. I worked maintenance for the county water plant for more than 4 decades. Pipes, pumps, pressure gauges. You learn patience doing that kind of work. You learn how problems don't announce themselves. They whisper. They leak. They wait until someone stops paying attention. I married Margaret when I was 36. She already had a son, Evan, 9 years old, sharp eyes, quick smile. His father was gone more often than he was present, so I stepped in without trying to replace anyone. I packed lunches, fixed bikes, showed up to school meetings. I never asked him to call me Dad. I figure respect earned itself over time. Margaret died 6 years ago. Quietly, the way she lived. After the funeral, Evan hugged me like a man checking off a responsibility. His sister, Claire, did the same. They promised to stay close. They didn't. Holidays thinned out. Calls turned into texts. Texts turned into nothing. I didn't complain. I filled my days. I fixed my porch. I read. I walked the same loop through town every morning. I learned how to be alone without being lonely. So when I stopped at Miller's Corner Fuel one afternoon and bought a lottery ticket without thinking, it felt like nothing. The clerk joked. I smiled. The ticket sat on my counter under unpaid mail and grocery coupons for 2 days. When I finally checked it, I checked again. Then again. Then I sat down because my knees forgot how to hold me. $2.7 billion. I didn't celebrate. I didn't call anyone. I made tea. I sat at my kitchen table and thought about Margaret. I thought about how strange it was that money, of all things, would find me when I was finally content without it. The official letter came a few days later. Real. Verified. I called an elder law attorney I'd once heard speak at the library, Denise Core. The first thing she told me was simple. Harold, don't tell anyone yet. Not family. Money doesn't change people. It shows you who they already were. Someone talked anyway. Within a week, my phone rang more than it had in the previous year combined. Evan called first. His voice was warm, almost rehearsed. He asked how I was feeling. Not how I was doing, but how I was feeling. Like I'd caught something. Claire followed with long messages about family dinners and reconnecting. Lily, my granddaughter, sent a heart emoji and asked if I'd come to her recital. Then Evan showed up at my door with pastries and a legal pad. He sat across from me at my kitchen table, tapping his pen like we were in a boardroom. He said he was worried. Said sudden wealth could be overwhelming at my age. He mentioned scams, taxes, mistakes people make when they're emotional. Then he slid a folder toward me. Inside were documents already filled out, trust structures, power of attorney drafts. His name typed neatly in the margins. I can manage things for you, he said gently, just until everything settles. I looked at him and realized something important. He wasn't asking. He was assuming. I laughed once. Quietly. That laugh offended him more than shouting ever could have. Over the next few days, concern turned into pressure. Pressure turned into whispers. Evan talked to doctors I'd never met. Claire started calling my neighbors. Ruth called her next door, stopped waving, and started watching. Then the letter arrived. A court notice. Capacity hearing. Filed by my own stepson. They weren't trying to help me. They were trying to remove me from my money, my home, my decisions. to bury me under paperwork and smiles. What they didn't know was that I'd spent my life fixing systems quietly. And people, I learned, were just another system. And systems always leave records. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, opened my old laptop, and began saving everything. Calls, messages, visits, every smile that didn't reach the eyes. I didn't confront them. I didn't panic. I planned. Because when someone decides you're weak, the smartest thing you can do is let them believe it. Right up until the moment they expose themselves. And they were already doing that for me. I didn't sleep much after court notice arrived. Not because I was afraid, but because my mind was finally busy in a way it hadn't been in years. When you spend most of your life being underestimated, you learn something useful. You learn how to wait. And waiting, when paired with preparation, becomes power. The morning after the notice, I woke up at my usual time, made coffee, fed the cat, watered the plants. Routine is important when other people are trying to frame you as unstable. I called Denise Core before 9. She answered on the second ring. They filed without medical proof, she said after I read the letter to her. That tells me they're rushing. That's good for us. She told me exactly what to do. Document everything. Don't confront. Don't argue. Let them talk. Let them assume. And most importantly, let them make mistakes. So that's what I did. I answered Evan's calls after that. Calmly, politely, I thanked him for his concern. I told him I was a little overwhelmed, that I appreciated him stepping in. I let him believe his strategy was working. Claire came by 2 days later with groceries I didn't ask for, and a look that bounced between pity and inspection. She walked through my house slowly, glancing at corners, shelves, the thermostat. Dad would have wanted you taken care of, she said softly. I nodded. I agreed. I even sighed at the right moments. She suggested I might want to downsize. Somewhere simpler. Somewhere closer to them. She mentioned a place she and Evan had already looked at. Assisted living adjacent. Just in case. That night, I backed up my phone to 3 separate drives. The next week became a parade of concern. Evan scheduled appointments I didn't approve. Claire emailed lists of financial advisors I didn't ask for. Ruth called her, brought over soup, and asked too many questions about my memory. And then Evan made his first real mistake. He left a voicemail while driving, forgetting to hang up. I caught the whole thing. He's cooperating. Evan said to someone else in the car, "Yeah, he thinks we're helping. The lawyer says once the judge signs, it's clean. Accounts freeze, decisions shift. We'll deal with the optics later." Optics. I forwarded the file to Denise without saying a word. 2 days later, she installed a small camera in my kitchen and helped me set up call recording software. Legal. Clean. Documented. Harold, she said, look at me dead in the eye. They're not trying to protect you. They're trying to preempt you. I smiled. They're late. The capacity hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks out. Evan thought that meant time was on his side. He didn't realize every day gave him more rope. He brought a doctor to my house the following Monday. A polite man with tired eyes who asked me what year it was, who the president was, and whether I knew why he was there. I answered calmly. Correctly. I even offered him tea. He left looking confused. That night, Evan texted, "We might need a second opinion." I replied, "Whatever you think is best." That response made him bold. He started speaking for me. To banks. To advisors. To people who suddenly believed he was already in charge. He even told Lily that Grandpa's having a hard time. That one hurt more than I expected. But pain has a way of sharpening focus. Denise filed a motion to delay the hearing pending full financial disclosure from petitioners. Evan panicked. He called me 3 times in one afternoon. "Harold," he said, dropping the act for the first time, "why are lawyers suddenly involved?" I paused before answering. "I thought that's what you wanted." Silence. After that, things escalated quickly. Claire showed up crying one evening, saying Evan was under stress, that this wasn't supposed to turn adversarial. She said family should handle things privately. I nodded. I handed her tissues. I let her cry. The camera caught everything. The following week, Denise uncovered something interesting. Evan had already contacted 2 private wealth managers using my name. One of them sent her copies of emails where Evan described me as declining and easily confused. That language mattered. It showed intent. The day before the hearing, Evan came over again. No pastries this time. No folder. Just anger poorly disguised as frustration. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," he said, pacing my kitchen. I sat at the table, hands folded, recording running. "I trusted you," he added. I looked up at him. "You trusted me to what?" He stopped pacing. "To let you help?" he snapped. "No," I said quietly. "You trusted me to step aside." He laughed bitterly. "You don't understand how this works." That was when I knew he'd already lost. The hearing itself was short. Denise spoke first. Calm. Precise. She laid out the timeline. The sudden contact. The pre-filled documents. The recorded calls. The emails. The doctor's clean assessment. My untouched accounts. Then she played the voicemail. Evan went pale. The judge didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He dismissed a petition on the spot and warned Evan about abusive process. But that wasn't the real consequence. Because once the court record existed, everything else unraveled. Banks froze Evan out. Advisors backed away. Claire stopped calling. And Lily sent me a message that simply said, "I'm sorry. I didn't know." I didn't reply right away. I went for a walk instead. The town looked the same. Brick buildings. Familiar faces. But I felt different. Lighter. Not because I'd won, but because I finally stopped playing the role they assigned me. And while Evan thought the story ended with the judge's ruling, he was wrong. Because that ruling gave me something far more valuable than protection. It gave me freedom. And with freedom, I was about to make a choice none of them saw coming. Freedom changes the way you hear silence. After the hearing, my house didn't feel empty anymore. It felt calm. The phone stopped ringing. The neighbors stopped hovering. Ruth Calder avoided my eyes when we passed on the sidewalk, and I let that be. I wasn't interested in collecting apologies. I was interested in finishing what I'd started. Denise told me to expect retaliation in subtler forms. People who lose control don't always walk away, she said. Sometimes they change tactics. She wasn't wrong. Evan didn't call again, but the noise found other routes. Anonymous wellness checks. A letter from a financial institution asking me to confirm recent unusual activity. A soft, public narrative forming that I was stubborn, confused, being led astray by lawyers who want to cut. Claire fed that story to anyone who would listen. She didn't shout it. She leaked it. I didn't respond. Not publicly. Not privately. I kept living small and steady, which drove them crazy. People who want control hate patience, because patience doesn't give them anything to grab. Denise and I met weekly at the Briarfield Public Archive. She brought files. I brought notes. We talked through options, trusts, foundations, irrevocable structures. I listened carefully. I asked questions. I learned. I'd spent my career keeping systems from collapsing. Now I was building one that couldn't be hijacked. I decided 2 things early on. First, no money would move until every safeguard was in place. Second, the exposure would be indirect. I wasn't going to accuse Evan in public. I was going to let the truth stand where it couldn't be edited. The opportunity came faster than I expected. A reporter from the Franklin County Gazette called my house one afternoon. She said she was working on a piece about late-life lottery winners and the risks of exploitation. She'd heard my name through court filings and asked for comment. Denise told me I didn't have to speak. I told her I would, on one condition. No names. No photos. No dramatics. I spoke calmly. I told the reporter about sudden concern, about paperwork arriving before conversations, about being told I needed help I never asked for. I didn't accuse anyone. I described behavior. That distinction mattered. The article ran on page 3 with a careful headline about elder autonomy. It didn't mention Evan or Claire, but people who knew us didn't need a map. Phones buzzed. Whispers shifted direction. The story stopped being about me losing capacity and started being about people trying to take it. Evan sent one text after that. Just 3 words. You embarrassed us. I read it twice, then archived it with the others. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not from fear, from memory. I thought about Margaret, about the compromises we make when we think keeping peace is the same as preserving love. I wish she were there to see this. Not the money, but the moment I finally chose myself. The next phase required precision. I created a charitable trust, quietly, with Denise overseeing every line. The Northridge Trade Youth Trust. No family trustees. No loopholes. The purpose was narrow and protected. Scholarships and apprenticeships for kids who wanted to learn skilled trades. Plumbing, electrical, mechanical systems. The work that kept the world running while other people took credit. I didn't announce it. Evan found out anyway. He showed up at my door uninvited 3 weeks later. No pastries. No legal pad. Just anger, poorly dressed as concern. You're giving away, he said, standing in my living room like he still owned it. You're cutting us out. I didn't raise my voice. I'm choosing where it goes. You're doing this to punish us. I shook my head. No, I'm doing it to finish something. He laughed sharply. You think people will see you as noble? They'll see you as bitter. I looked at him for a long moment. They already saw you as helpful, I said. How did that turn out? He didn't answer. He left without slamming the door, which told me he knew shouting wouldn't work anymore. The retaliation shifted again. Claire reached out through Lily. My granddaughter asked if we could talk. Just us. No parents. I agreed. We met at a cafe halfway between our houses. She looked tired, older than her years. Guilt will do that. I didn't know everything, she said. They told me you were sick. I stirred my coffee. What do you think now? She hesitated. I think they were scared. And when people are scared, they justify things. That's true, I said. And it doesn't make them harmless. She nodded slowly. She didn't ask for money. She didn't ask me to fix anything. That mattered. When we parted, she hugged me and it felt real. 2 days later, Denise called with news. Evan had tried to challenge the trust. Not directly. He filed a complaint with a regulatory board, claiming undue influence. That complaint triggered an automatic review. It was the last lever he had left. Denise wasn't worried. She was ready. The review took weeks. Investigators came. They asked questions. They checked records. They listened to audio. They watched video. They read transcripts. Everything was clean. When the review closed with no findings, the result didn't make headlines. But it landed where it mattered. Banks took notes. Advisors updated files. Evan's name gained a quiet asterisk. He didn't contact me after that. Instead, something else happened. The kids started writing letters. Handwritten notes from students who'd been accepted into the apprenticeship program. Thank yous that weren't polished. Gratitude that didn't ask for anything else. I read every one. I kept them in a drawer by my bed. The noise faded. The narrative settled. I became uninteresting again, and that suited me just fine. One afternoon, months later, I found a note tucked under my door. No name. Just 4 words written carefully. You were never weak. I didn't need to know who left it, because by then, I understood something I'd missed for most of my life. Strength isn't loud. It doesn't demand. It doesn't explain itself to people who've already decided not to listen. Strength waits. And I wasn't done waiting yet. The strange thing about winning is that it teaches you who was only standing near you for finish line. After the review closed and Evan's last legal attempt collapsed under its own weight, the house settled into a kind of quiet I'd never known before. Not the lonely quiet people warn you about when they talk about old age. This was earned quiet, the kind that comes after storms pass, and you realize your walls are still standing. I was 78 years old, and for the first time in decades, no one was managing me, monitoring me, or suggesting what I should do for my own good. No one was checking in with an agenda, hiding behind concern. No one was pretending love meant access. The money sat where it belonged, locked behind structures designed to outlive manipulation. I could have spent it on anything. Travel, property, indulgence. But the more space I gave myself, the clearer it became that this wasn't about enjoying what I gained. It was about deciding what would never be taken again. I spent my mornings the same way I always had. Coffee by the window, newspaper folded twice, shoes by the door, just in case I felt like walking farther than planned. Routine grounded me. It reminded me who I was before the numbers changed and the world suddenly decided I mattered. Denise checked in less frequently now. That was a good sign. Lawyers hovering means trouble. Lawyers trusting means stability. When we did talk, it was about maintenance, not defense. Endowments finalized. Safeguards confirmed. Succession plans written so clearly they left no room for interpretation. I'd learned something important during all this. People who plan to exploit you hate clarity. They thrive in gray areas, in assumptions, in we'll figure out later. Precision terrifies them. That precision came back to haunt Evan in a way I hadn't anticipated. It started quietly, as these things often do. A mutual acquaintance called me one afternoon. Careful with her words. Said she hoped I was well. Said she'd heard things. I didn't ask what things. I let her talk. Apparently, Evan had been telling people I was unstable long before the lottery, that the money had accelerated a decline, that he'd tried to step in as a responsible son and had been shut out by aggressive attorneys and internet strangers. He'd painted himself as a victim of circumstance. What he didn't realize was that stories travel faster than reputations can keep up with. People remembered details. The timing, his sudden availability, the paperwork he brought before conversations ever happened, the way he'd spoken about managing me while never once asking what I wanted. And then someone asked a simple question he couldn't answer. If your father was so unstable, why did you wait until billions were involved to worry? That question stuck. It echoed through rooms I wasn't in, through conversations I never heard directly. But consequences have a way of finding their targets without needing your presence. I didn't feel satisfaction when I heard about it, just a quiet confirmation. Truth doesn't rush. It arrives when people are finally ready to notice patterns. Claire tried once more. She sent an email, not a demand, not an apology either. A memory. A childhood anecdote about a camping trip I barely remembered. A soft attempt to rewind time, without acknowledging what had broken it. I read it carefully. Then I closed it. Some bridges aren't burned. They're dismantled plank by plank, until there's nothing left to cross. Lily stayed in touch. Not often, not dramatically, just enough to let me know she was thinking for herself now. She never mentioned money, never hinted at entitlement. She asked about my garden, about the books I was reading, about stories from before she was born. That mattered. One afternoon, she asked a question that caught me off guard. Do you regret not fighting sooner? I thought about it longer than she probably expected. No, I said, I regret not listening to my discomfort when it first showed up. That seemed to land. The foundation began its work quietly. No press releases. No ceremonies. Just checks sent, programs funded, apprentices placed. I visited once, anonymously, standing at the back of a workshop, watching young people learn skills that would feed them, house them, ground them. No one knew who I was. And that made it perfect. I wasn't building a legacy with my name on it. I was building one that couldn't be rewritten. Time passed the way it does when you stop measuring it by other people's expectations. Seasons changed. Birthdays came and went without drama. I stopped bracing myself every time the phone rang. Then one evening, the call came anyway. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Habit told me to let it go. Instinct told me this was something different. It was Evan. His voice sounded smaller, stripped of certainty. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't mention money. He said my name like it was something fragile. I didn't think you'd pick up, he said. I didn't either, I replied. There was a pause, long enough to hear his breathing change. I lost my job, he said finally. I waited. They said I wasn't trustworthy, he continued. That questions had been raised, that associations mattered. I still waited. I just wanted you to know, he said. I wasn't trying to hurt you. That was the moment I understood something vital. Intent doesn't erase impact, and explanations aren't the same as accountability. I believe you, I said calmly. You didn't intend to hurt me. You intended to control me, and you were willing to hurt me to do it. Silence. I hope you figure things out, I added, but I'm not the place you land while you do. He didn't argue. He didn't apologize. He just said goodbye. When the call ended, I didn't feel shaken. I felt finished. Closure doesn't always come with reconciliation. Sometimes it comes with clarity. I slept well that night. The following months were uneventful in the best possible way. No more whispers. No more legal maneuvers. No more performances of concern. Just days stacked gently on top of each other, steady and unremarkable. I aged, slowly, honestly, without anyone trying to weaponize it. People sometimes ask if the money changed me. It didn't. It exposed everyone else. It showed me who saw me as a person, and who saw me as a resource, who respected my autonomy and who feared it, who could sit with my independence, and who needed me diminished to feel powerful. And it gave me one final gift, the ability to choose peace without asking permission. Now, when I look back on all, I don't think about the number. I think about the moment I realized I was no longer auditioning for love. That realization was worth more than anything I won. Before you go, if this story meant something to you, if you've ever been underestimated, dismissed, or targeted because someone thought you were easy to control, take a second to support this space. Subscribe, share where you're watching from, and let your presence help stories like this reach the people who need them most.